Hey, Sharon.
Hey, John.
So I thought it was 3 minutes. I was following the clock at the top.
Okay, no worries. This
But
is
we had some ideas and we put them on the document at the
good.
bottom in the blue section.
All
So
right, I appreciate it. Thanks.
so
Thank
this is
you.
going well so far.
Oh yeah, the video didn't work.
Well, I mean, whatever. We've all been to Harcum. It's fine.
It's true. It's true. You know, if we finish early, I can, and you know, with our work, and I can get the video going, I will get it going at the end. I don't know if you've seen it. It's really cool. I mean, we're all Harcum folks here. They've put together some really nice stuff. Well, Tyler, I'm telling you, you guys, you know, it's really impressive.
Is it one of the ones that like Crystal hosts?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good. I've seen those before. Those are great.
They play them at open house now. So if you've been at one of the virtual open houses, you've seen them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to grab sort of the first 4.5 or 5 minutes of the one that's, you know, on our website. That's just the Visit Harcum, you know, what you get, you know, when you click on that. I just love the spirit of it. It's amusing and warm and and really informative.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great. All right, I'm going to mute myself now.
Hi, John.
Hey, Lynn.
Let's see. So maybe we scared people off.
They might not
No,
know
there
you
we go. There we
early.
go. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Claire.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe debrief a little bit. Would anybody, if we could get a representative from each group, just to sort of give us maybe a little insight into what your conversation was, that would be great. Anybody who wants to start, feel free to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, so I was with Mike and Karen. And I guess this would be beneficial for everyone to kind of hear, just because I am the career and transfer director. You may have known my predecessor, Danielle Dove, who's been fantastic. So we went through a little bit of staffing changes, but we're back up to 2 people, myself and Claire. And I wanted to address some of the questions I was reading before this all started. We are definitely planning on having much more mock interviews with a bunch of people. We actually have, Claire and I actually sat down this past week to come up with a bunch of ideas, since we're going to be in person, but still maintain flexibility if that doesn't tend to be the case come the fall. But some of our bigger ideas is setting up a shadowing program where we'll partner with the Alumni Association to, partner current students with professional alumni in their fields to give them kind of like a mentor, kind of learn what their job's actually about, to make sure, they're in the right program and that's what they want to do and that they're on the right track. And then another thing we want to do, and Claire might be able to talk a little bit more about this because it was her fantastic idea, was setting up a postgraduate job searching group. So after graduation, when everyone's hitting that job search phase, we would kind of host a session where they can collaborate with each other. We can be there as professional support to work on the resumes, give them some, job searching advice, but they can work together and not feel so alone in that entire endeavor. So that's 2 of the really big things we're looking at. Of course, we took a big hit with all of our in-person fairs, which is why there's not as many programs on the list as we would have liked. But we're looking to do a bigger career fair to hit more employers and kind of invite them. We also have a new career management system that we're using in lieu of Purple Briefcase that offers a fantastic option for virtual fairs to keep that, because we know it's convenient, but we also want to acknowledge that people are missing that social interaction in person. So we're planning a lot of different in-person activities, transfer fairs, career fairs like that. But I can go on and all.
Yeah.
My bread and butter, But
Thanks so much, Trevor. I think that helps to give just a broader, and sort of brighter picture of what was going on. Like I said on the document, all I could really do was hit on the highlights. So thanks for that. Let's see if there are any other groups who had some thoughts, questions, or responses.
I could briefly talk for myself. Dr. Cooper and Tyler were together, we had a few questions more than anything else. So I was kind of curious about if there was any data collected and what the student feedback was on it. Obviously, you don't have to answer that question now. Just something that I think would be super beneficial to rolling this out. Tyler was curious if that could be instituted for multiple programs and what was the process was to get that going, and who was contacted. And then Dr. Cooper was curious as to whether these interviews were instituted as a response to the CTE from last year, or if it was something that was kind of already instituted and placed into the CTE. So more questions than anything else.
Yeah, so those are good. And I think they are kind of specific questions to career and transfer. And what I would do would be to invite Trevor and Claire, on the collaborative document, because I'm going to import these comments obviously into the overall larger collaborative document. So when I do that, you can take a look and please, continue the discussion there. Those are great questions, I think, and examining them further, would really help us think about, what we do in the future, even as soon as next year. So thanks, those were great. Anybody else on the first use of funds, the career transfer?
I just wanted to say that I was with Claire and Jane, and Claire gave us a great overview of all your exciting programs, your career services, your counseling, your mock interviews, your resume, helping the students develop their career goals, your career fairs. So I just want to thank her for that.
Yes, I thank you too, Claire, and thank you.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
why is this important? This is important because there are also Perkins indicators, and that's where the data comes in.
Right.
And we don't have that back from the state yet because
do
the
not.
state changed databases in the middle of the COVID, and they've been late in providing those numbers to us. But at the secondary, we have a senior survey X number of months out from when the students graduate from high school, and then they are measured as to whether or not they are working or in school relative to what they took at the CTC, at the Career and Tech Center. So does the post-secondary have a similar survey? Because I think that's the number that's going to drive
That's
back,
correct.
and that's where this discussion came from, that it's important that students are in a major that's going to lead to a career field that they really want to be in, so
Right.
that Perkins is then helping to support the development of a workforce.
Right. Yes, and there is a post-secondary survey, and we don't have the results yet. And so that is just sort of leaps ahead to sort of where I was going to touch, before we left each other all today, is, what are the next steps? Well, when we receive the performance indicator data report from the state, that's going to be sort of part B of the stakeholder work this year. I'm going to share that via the collaborative document, and that'll be much more data heavy, than what we're doing today. And if you were with us last year as a stakeholder, you know that last year's process, the comprehensive local needs assessment, and if you weren't, it's important that you do know, it was very data heavy. It was all about, looking at the data. It was disaggregated by various student populations. And we spent a long time, much more than an hour together, closely, analyzing and having discussions about that. And that's where the stakeholder identified needs came from, those very data informed reports and the discussions about them. So that's what was required to happen in the first year of the Perkins 5, which was the previous year. This year, as a stakeholder group, the mission is really to sort of to review what was talked about and decided and recommended last year, to take a look at some of the actions that Harcum engaged in this year to support career and technical education students. But then also, and that's what we're doing today. And then also, when I do receive the data from the state this year, I will share with you a more data-centered look at the progress that Harcum is making to meet the performance, the set performance levels on these performance indicators that really have to do with how students, primarily at the post-secondary level, they look at how students do post-graduation. Do they go on to further education? Are they placed, in jobs and careers that are related to their secondary and post-secondary education, and so on. Okay, so thank you, Jane, for bringing that up, and to sort of connect it with what our next steps are and what we did last year as well. Okay. Maybe I've had some suggestions, and maybe we'll try something a little bit different for the second stakeholder discussion, and we'll just stay together as a whole group, and perhaps I can review. I can share the document with you. You can certainly add comments to it, but maybe it's better. Maybe we'll just try having a conversation about it and see how that goes. And it might be, a little bit more effective use of our time. So what I'd like to do first is get the document and copy the link and put it into the chat so that you can access it in case you wanted to have your own copy of it to look at. and I will also share it.
Just a nudge. I think it went to me, so I just sent it to everybody.
Oh,
We just piggyback off each other.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to make sure that I had the right document open. There it is. Okay, so second required of use is to provide professional development. Last year in the assessment, the stakeholders had the following identified needs for us. You can take a look at your own document if you like, or I can highlight it for us here. So identified needs regarding professional development were to identify behaviors that lead to failure and train instructors to notice and act on them. To help students develop a sense of connection, again, with the program between the course, the career, and the program, the course, and the career relatedness, to better serve students aging out of foster care and homelessness, more clearly define what students are looking for in internships. For instance, what should the learning outcomes be for internships, and professional development for all faculty that addresses the needs of special populations, including a session on implicit bias. So the recommended actions that were funded in Perkins for us this year to address these needs were a series of connected and consistent presentations for professional development, with an emphasis on providing instructors with an understanding of the needs of all students, but especially for the special populations as defined by Perkins. Also, there was funding for a conference and meeting attendance for the Perkins coordinator. So let's see. Just to highlight a little bit, what did Perkins do this year? What did professional development, what were the professional development actions this year? Oh, so we focused on providing instructors with strategies for recognizing all sorts of student needs, both academic and non-academic. This is, what a lot of us were doing in education and other fields this year too, right? We were trying to figure out how to make all of this work remote and hybrid, and, paying attention to, especially for our already sort of marginalized populations of students, the increased sort of implications of trauma associated with the pandemic. We tried to focus supports for instructors to respond to students appropriately, as resources. Also, professional development focused on stress management for instructors, for staff, and for students, and then best practices for engaging students in remote learning. It was a rapid pivot, and the pivot had to go in a lot of different directions. So we focused our efforts on professional development, to try to meet the needs that that our students were telling us that they had. The Perkins coordinator also did attend and present at a fall conference remotely, the Integrated Learning Conference. That was Valjean. There was no other conference or meeting attendance that happened this year. So that's a lot of me talking, and maybe you've been able to think a little bit while I was talking. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and wonder if anybody just had any thoughts, comments, questions about professional development, especially as related to the needs of the career and technical education students. Alexandria?
I was just curious, so speaking as someone who started like in January, so I think after some of these development opportunities happen, if it'd be possible to do some sort of training program again for staff, because I think Sharon, you mentioned development for faculty addressing this population, which I think makes total sense, right? Because especially this year with Zoom, they're, they were the
Right.
faculty probably were seeing the most students, right? So it was great for identifying, but I think that we're going to continue to see this population change and if not grow over the next, we're not out of it completely. And so I think it might be really, at least speaking just for myself, I mean, I'm happy to hear feedback, but I would love, if there was more training for that population, that'd be something I'd be really interested to do as a support staff.
Okay, thank you. That's
Yeah.
helpful to know. Appreciate it.
And to
So-
dovetail Alexandria, it might be a good time at the beginning of the year meetings that we have with all the faculty and staff, and then again in the January timeframe.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Were these trainings Perkins funded, and who did the trainings? Were they homegrown, or did you bring in consultants and SMEs to be able to bring this? And was it, you said it was ongoing, but was it faculty 6 times during the year? Was it the rest of the staff? How was it actually delivered?
Yeah, so it was run by basically, our director of professional development at Harcum, and she brings in experts and they make presentations. We do have their individual workshops, and then there are times when all the faculty are together at the beginning of the semesters for full day trainings. And she adjusted, I think, very, what do I want to say? She was very responsive to the needs as they evolved over the year, which is why I sort of categorized them the way that I did. She really adjusted the trainings to make sure that we were addressing the needs of the students and the instructors who were needing to constantly evolve, not just with the technology, because some of the workshops did focus on the technology that helped to increase engagement and so on. But also there were, experts on things like, self-care and trauma awareness and so on. So our in-house director of professional development ran some of the more tech-oriented things herself, and then brought in, the real high-level specialists, I think, for some of the other sort of things that, our students and instructors say that they needed help with, more the non-academic, pieces of what they needed support with this year.
Were they Perkins funded?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? Go ahead, Claire.
One thing, just kind of adding to what Alexandria and Mike had brought to the table previously. I started in December too, so I'm still trying to piece together everything. But I wonder if there is a benefit of just having something like this be integrated into normal onboarding of new staff, and maybe even integrate that as part of annual performance evaluations for all employees, just so that it's not just it's integrating into something that's already in place. Maybe that would be easier.
So just to follow through on that, to sort of make it more broadly accessible and sort of accessible by default instead of being a special,
like, extra piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. And I want you to know I am going to be sure to forward all of these suggestions and comments to the appropriate folks here at Harcum who aren't able to be with us today, but who would be involved in the work that would need to be done to see these innovations in place. So I appreciate it. Just for the sake of time, unless somebody else has a burning need to speak about professional development, I was going to move on to our next one. Oh, okay. All right. So thank you for your comments on those. I'm going to share the document in the chat for our third required use. And our third required use is to provide within career and technical education the necessary technical skills. If it's all right with you, I'm just going to let you go ahead and look at it on your own. If anybody really wants me to take over your screen, let me know in the chat and I can do that. So maybe we can just review it this way. So it's required by Perkins that within career and technical education courses, the technical skills are taught so that students can pursue high skill, high wage, or in-demand industry sector positions and occupations. Last year, the stakeholders identified the need that we should gather information of work-based classroom simulations that are embedded in courses. Kind of a general statement there. The recommended actions that flowed from this required use and the identified needs were to purchase supplies and education, focusing on this kind of simulation equipment, and also instruction manuals for the academic internship program. So what did we do? We made all the recommended purchases of the supplies and equipment, except for the binders for the internship, because there was no in-person, no real in-person interaction around that this year on the campus. Physical binders didn't really seem to be the way to go. But the other simulation equipment, including software for the business programs, was purchased. So I now would invite anyone in the group who would like to comment or question to go ahead and do so. Anybody? No? Mike, could I put you on the spot and just ask you about the business simulation software a little bit?
Sure. So we have several different software packages that we use. However, we're working with one company who is helping us with an entrepreneurial software, which helps us design, develop, and create an experience for the student from the beginning, get them hooked into business and understand all the aspects of business, and pops the student in as if they were either just awarded a business or it's a family business that transitioned to them, and they've got to figure out operations, marketing, pricing, and the world opens up small and gets larger and larger as their understanding of what it takes to run a business expands. So that's pretty much what that does.
Okay, thank you. That was interesting, and it was also just something that I had been wanting to speak to you about anyway. So I was curious. So thanks for taking a minute to give us sort of an overview of it. I know it's really important for Perkins from their perspective that students have sort of really hands-on experience, and this is, I think that, the using software in this way, for simulations is, really essential for students in these kind of courses. So thanks very much for telling us a little bit about that. When I think about, educational equipment, and I think about Perkins and career and technical education, a lot of times I think about either our veterinary nursing program or our regular nursing or human nursing program. Perkins has this year, supplied funding for mannequins that were essential, for students to use. And, I think it's essential for us as we move forward to keep thinking about, simulation and hands-on experience for students. And, this is a big part of where our funding from Perkins goes. So I guess going forward, as we think about this, I'll look to you as stakeholders for ideas about the kind of things that we should be looking at And if there's anything that you know of that, we aren't discussing already, it would be helpful to hear from you about that. So, thank you.
Yeah, just to
Sure.
just to dovetail off of that, Sharon, and
Mhm.
kind of give you like a 30-second break. Students are learning different these days. They're taught via their electronic devices to learn in much shorter, quicker increments. And the technology and the approach to teaching is to kind of mirror that, but give them the longer term perspective and stretch and evolve that to being able to do other things with technology in their careers.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, I think my interpretation of what Perkins would like us to do is also to always be thinking about how we can innovate for our students, to keep everything sort of up to date and, cutting edge, if you will. And, I think, I feel that at Harcum, we're committed to that. And I look to our stakeholders, to hold us to it and to help us, to think about that creatively. So thank you. Anybody else on this particular use? Okay, so we'll move on to the next. Sharing the link with everybody for our fourth required use of Perkins funds, and that is to support integration of academic skills into career and technical education. Our identified need from last year was a summer bridge program to enhance skills before beginning college. In the COVID era, that was not something that was explored because that would, we're thinking about that more in terms of, a physical presence on the campus. The recommended actions by the stakeholders really were reflected in, salary support for student support personnel, including the director of tutoring services, the math specialist for in-class support, night and weekend librarian, and tutors. So what's the point of having, academic skills integrated into career and technical education programs? Well, the point is that we want to have graduates who are not just technically skilled, but who are more well-rounded and have academic skills like, reading, writing, communication, mathematical skills, and so on. So during this, the pivot to remote and hybrid learning, Harcum this year was very committed to developing course curricula that maintain the rigor of the face-to-face courses, including that of the integrated academic skills in the career and technical education program courses. And we also wanted to be sure that students had consistent access to all of the academic support services remotely to support the development of those academic skills. I've linked here and on our other shared document some of the library guides that were created this year to support student academic learning in the career and technical education courses. There was a science and math LibGuide for allied health programs, information literacy, a source bias guide that could be used across any career technical education course. The same with the academic research guide. The ones I have linked here are specifically for OTA and PTA. Also, our director of tutoring services moved the tutoring services online, so remote tutoring was available, ensuring that it was accessible to students, at all times in support of academic learning in their career technical education courses. So now I invite any comments or questions about integration of academic skills into the programming. Questions? No. Okay. Well, if we don't have a discussion about it, that's absolutely fine. In the context of this, if you have thoughts later, I trust that you will use the collaborative document to record those. now move to the fifth required use. And I will share that with you, and that is to support increased student achievement. Okay, that's a tall order of business. You can see that last year's stakeholder recommendations and identified needs, it's a long list of identified needs that are associated with increasing student achievement, because it's a, sort of a broad overarching goal. So identified needs are there. That there's a long list of them, but I don't think I necessarily need to read them out to you. But the things that we did were aligned. I'm skipping now to the highlighted column. The highlighted actions that where they're completed or ongoing at Harcum this year. So aligned with also the professional development, in which, we tried to adapt as we moved through the pandemic year to address the needs of all students, but especially those in the special populations who, were experiencing this sort of the stress and trauma, especially acutely. We oriented our student supports, in that way as well. So I think we have a number of representatives from our student supports at Harcum with us today, and I guess I would just open up the conversation now if any of them wanted to speak to anything about their actions this year, or if anyone had questions for them.
Yeah, I can kind of just give a brief overview of some of the things that we did this past year. It was a challenge for sure. So we moved all the tutoring online. All students were instructed to connect with tutors via Zoom. All the tutors were trained to use Zoom and use screen sharing and use other online tools to administer tutoring and work with students, whether that was Google Docs or whiteboard functions on Zoom. We also built a Canvas shell for the Student Success Center. And this was something that we had wanted to do for a while, and this was kind of the fire to make it happen. But we built a Canvas course for the Student Success Center. And by course, I mean, there was no assignments. It was an information hub that kind of had links to all the different supports available to students at Harcum campus. So student support services, tutoring. We had a link to the ODS website, to career and transfer. We posted career and transfer flyers. We posted flyers for online workshops that the SSS team hosted. So we really did a lot of groundwork to kind of engage students. Alex and Ashley were consistently emailing and contacting students to get them involved with workshops and to connect. So there was a lot of work happening online as well.
Great, thanks, John. That was a very quick overview of a lot of work. So thank you for that. Jane, did you have a question or comment?
Well, the required use of funds is to support increased student achievement. At the secondary, we measure Keystone exams, NOCD, high school graduation. What is that measurement? What's the indicator at the post-secondary?
Yes, well, that's a really good question. And we're trying to look now more closely at, what the best way to measure this is. We're always looking at student persistence and completion. And, those are our key indicators at this point. One thing that we've done that is not Perkins funded, but that does sort of respond to some of the needs that were identified last year by the stakeholders, but this is actually using local funds. The college has developed, is developing sort of a data management system using software called Starfish. And it's going to allow us to track more closely and identify where the stumbling points are for students. We know it anecdotally, and we had some built-in, like sort of self-built systems for monitoring, where students were sort of struggling in a semester, looking at things like attendance early in the semester. Now that we have all of our courses really switched into our learning management system that's accessible, remotely, Canvas, we can also sort of monitor student check-ins, are they attending class, are they checking in, and so on. So right now we're sort of focusing our efforts on looking at persistence and completion with the students.
Well, one of the ways I think the state's going to look at is how many students are earning their third-party licensing.
Mhm.
How many are getting credentialed, not just graduating, finishing
Right.
a degree, but how
Right.
many are
And
in-
that data has always been collected. Yeah. So that is happening and that is ongoing. And we're sort of adding this other component so that, as the semesters move along, we don't lose any students through, in way we stay in contact with each other as colleagues, and then also we're going to be able going forward to monitor more closely some of these indicators that we think might show us that students are struggling and might not be able to persist, and address financial issues and all sorts of academic and other non-academic.
So are there targeted supports for students who are ready to take those exams, like tutoring for
Yes.
that tech exam?
Yes. All of those exams have, I think virtually all of the programs have training, where it either occurs from the program staff at Harcum, or they bring in, outside trainers to prepare the students for those credentialing exams.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. For the sake of time, there is a sixth required use, and that is to evaluate programs, and it's kind of related to what Jane was saying. So I think this is a reasonable segue. I think we can have a better conversation with that after we actually have some data from the state and can look at the report about the performance indicators for this year. So when I have that, I will be sharing it with you. And this connects with, what are our next steps. So when I receive that data, I'll share it with you. I'm hoping that we can have a conversation using the collaborative document. If I have requests though, and there are people, whether it's the whole group or some smaller number of us who wanted to gather and have another synchronous conversation like this about the data, I would certainly be happy to do that as well. But at the very, my initial plan was to make it more flexible for everybody to be able to work asynchronously. But if anybody wants to work synchronously moving forward, please let me know that. I will share that data with you, those performance reports, as soon as I have it. My goal is that we continue our conversation in the framework in which it's created now. When we have the data, we'll add that piece to our conversation, and then we would have a vote by May 31st by the stakeholders about recommendations for our action plan for the next year, which would begin, it runs July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know everybody's pressed right now with a lot of responsibilities. So thank you for taking this hour to be together as a group and to move this discussion forward. I'll stay on. If anybody has anything that they'd like to ask me or comment with me, I'll stay on. Otherwise, I thank you all for your participation. I'll be sharing the transcript, and this will be available to stakeholders who were not able to be here, as well as to you. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Sharon.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate it. And
Yeah.
thanks. I saw you commented on the shared document. So thanks.
I tried to.
Yeah, I mean, the point is to have a conversation. And, all of these pieces kind of move that conversation forward. So